Welcome to part 3 of my examination of the TNA Knockout division that was so awesome, 2 parts could not hope to contain it. In the 2 previous installments, I went over some of the things that caused TNA's women's division to fall from the heights it achieved originally, how interest in it has greatly tapered off in the last year, and examined the state of the current roster, looking at each member of it in detail. And as far as the current roster is concerned, I have to say, it's seen better days. And if there's any validity to this gradual phasing out theory I mentioned, and I'm not saying there is, it could be in even worse shape in, say, a year from now. Now, based on all the different factors that I've tried to explain here as best I can, if the Knockout division is in a transitional period right now, with management gradually de-emphasizing some of the old guard and eventually parting ways with them, the current knockouts that I believe they would most want to keep in the mix are Tara, Mickey, Tessmacher, and Velvet. That's not nearly enough to sustain a division of any kind for very long. And we haven't even taken the state of the championships into account yet. I don't think TNA have any plans for the Knockout tag titles. They'll probably be scrapped sooner or later. But the singles title is in as bad, if not worse shape, simply because every active knockout they have has held it. Think about that. Every single knockout left has been the Knockouts champion at least twice, except for Velvet, who's had it once. But if we're counting the tag titles too, then every knockout in the company is a multi-time champion. So what are these women really fighting over? Why do any of them even want the title now? It doesn't mean anything anymore. They've all won it. Any prestige it used to have is long gone. At most, it's about petty bragging rights now, but that's not enough to hang a title on. This entire championship division has absolutely nowhere left to go. So basically, that leaves the once rich and diverse Knockout division with a dwindling roster with increasingly limited creative possibilities and championships whose worth is pretty dubious at this point. It would be the tip of the iceberg, but if you really wanted to rebuild and revamp the Knockout division, probably one of the first things you'd want to do is eliminate the current championships. Retire the Knockouts title and introduce a new one. Introduce the TNA Women's title. At least then the Knockouts would have something new to fight over that you could believe they all want. But is this likely to happen? Probably not. I don't think TNA would concern themselves with something like this. We'll just have to deal with the title as is. I don't like it. I think it's a mistake to continue on with this same championship, but I doubt they feel any real need to change it. So it's one of those things that we're just going to have to deal with. Now let's talk about future prospects. The women that will eventually be brought in to replenish the Knockout roster, whenever that may be. It has to happen sooner or later. But let's try to keep this simple, because it's really easy for us as fans to say that TNA should sign Cherry Bomb, or they should sign Nikki Storm, or they should sign this person or that person. Well, from TNA's point of view, it's probably a lot more complicated. Maybe they want someone to fill a specific type of role that not every female talent out there is going to be right for. And even if they have someone in mind, I imagine there are a lot of different people in management that have to agree on this person. So without really knowing what TNA is looking for in prospective knockouts, let's focus on the most likely candidates. Taylor Hendricks, the first and currently only female gut check winner, and TNA's first developmental knockout. Pretty much pushed as the top woman in OVW these days, and she's done pretty well for herself in her 2 Impact matches so far. Gotten good crowd reactions. She may get called up to the main roster eventually, or she might not, but she does at least have her foot in the door. Taryn Terrell. She's a referee at the moment, but I assume she'll transition into a wrestling role at some point. She's wrestling in developmental now, so that'll happen sooner or later. Love it or hate it. And the Blossom Twins, also from OVW, and now the British Boot Camp show as well. And if that show is anything like WWE's Tough Enough, I figure TNA is just going to sign all the contestants they like regardless of who actually wins. So I'm kind of expecting the Blossoms to get contracts next year, but it hasn't happened yet. And I guess Leva Bates should get an honorable mention as well. She showed up a few months ago as an accomplice of the Aces and Eights, macing Sting and Hogan in the face, which was awesome. I thought TNA might have something in mind for her, but since then she hasn't appeared. But Leva's been very coy about this ever since. She's avoided talking about it in interviews and on her website. There has to be a reason for that. But she's still working indie dates. She's worked iPay-per-view since then, which we know TNA doesn't let their talent do. So who really knows? Leva's a wait and see for the time being. These are the female talents with the best chance of joining the official Knockout roster right now. They might not be everyone's first choices, but they are the ones at the front of the line. And I think there are some nice possibilities here. Taylor Hendricks, while still a work in progress, is someone that I think has all the tools to be a star for TNA. She's strong on the mic, she looks great, wrestling is coming along, she's already gotten over as the plucky rookie babyface, and her backstory with the cancer scare is something that can get people to rally behind her. But judging from her work in OVW, I think her real talent is playing a heel. I think she shows more personality as a heel, she feels less generic that way. I could easily see her being paired up with Tara doing TNT 2.0 as like a mentor-protege type of thing. I mean, she had her 2 matches with Tara. She looks up to Tara a lot. You could say that she did this to gain Tara's respect. I think that would make a lot of sense. Now, the Blossom twins are 2 women that I'm actually kind of surprised TNA haven't signed already, given their affiliation with OVW. Plus, for a company with women's tag team championships, why wouldn't you jump at the chance to sign a set of gorgeous identical twins who can wrestle? And don't talk to me about the Bella twins, okay? That's not what we're here for right now. The Blossoms are a team that I think could generate at least some interest in the Knockout tag titles, or make them more visible at the very least. Now, you can argue that there are better female tag teams out there, and you might even be right. But being identical twins could be a pretty nifty marketing gimmick if it's used correctly, and maybe that's what this Knockout tag team division has been missing. Maybe that's why management doesn't feel like devoting any time to it these days. But hell, those belts seem like they were made for the Blossoms. And I'd take them as the Knockout Tag Team Champions in a second over ODB and Eric Young. At least I believe the Blossoms actually want the titles. ODB and EY really don't seem to give a rat's ass. But more than that, there's one thing I would really love for TNA to do with the Blossoms. This is something I've wanted to see for a while now, and that's pairing them with Magnus. Think about it. You got this up-and-coming young star from the UK with the International Ladies Man gimmick. You have him walk to the ring every week with this beautiful English girl on one arm, her identical twin on the other arm. They help him win matches. He helps them win matches. I think that would really catch on, especially if they started picking up championships. TV title, Knockouts tag or singles title, etc. With Taryn Terrell, I think it's too soon to tell if she's going to be worth anything. As far as I know, she hasn't wrestled since her WWE run a few years ago. She just started wrestling in OVW, and yeah, she needs a lot of work. As for Leva Bates, she's someone you could put on TV right now and she'd do just fine in my opinion. She's got a fun personality, she can play a great underdog babyface, I've seen her play a very entertaining heel as well, and best of all, she's one of these women who stands out in a crowd. Now say what you want about her gimmick on the indies, but she makes people notice her. I don't know if she could do that gimmick in TNA, but the point is, Leva makes people pay attention to her because she's different from all the other women out there. And that's something the Knockout division has been lacking for a while now. Different personalities, unique characters. I mean, yeah, they went too far with some of them in the past. Example, time-traveling lesbian vampire Winter. But at least no 2 women were the same back then. Except the beautiful people, but that was kind of their thing. And this is something that has sadly not been lost, but been somewhat de-emphasized in recent times, and the division is worse for it in my opinion. I look at the Knockout roster now, and not as many people stand out. On that inaugural roster, everybody stood out. Every character was completely different. With the roster today, I still see differences, but I also see a lot more similarities than I'd like. In these days, it seems like less effort is going into making each woman distinct. There are less quote-unquote characters, and that's a shame because that used to be one of the division's strongest points, and something that TNA used to boast about. Our knockouts are all different shapes and sizes and colors and personalities. They're women from all walks of life, and a lot of that uniqueness just isn't there anymore. For example, aside from the fact that Miss Tessmacher can wrestle and Velvet Sky can't that well, name me one thing that really differentiates those 2 characters. I can't think of any. And I'll go one further. Aside from the fact that Mickie James is the country girl, what really separates her from those 2 character-wise? Not that much if you think about it. And it's not just them either. If you take away her Hollywood boyfriend, is there really a whole lot that differentiates Tara from Gail Kim? I guess Gail is the more serious character right now, but the difference is pretty negligible in my opinion. Do you see what I'm getting at here? A lot of these women are starting to kind of look the same. That's one of the reasons why I just had to shake my head when Taryn Terrell showed up. Sure, she's nice to look at, but is there anything that really separates her from every other hot blonde in the business? Not that I can see. Ironically, the most unique thing about her at the moment is that she's a referee. And unfortunately, I think most of this comes down to creative, and Pritchard perhaps not being as big a fan of the Knockouts as previous creative regimes were. But a lot of it is due to the women themselves, specifically the women that TNA are hiring, and this is where the problem can be partially remedied. If the writers are not going to be putting as much effort into crafting unique characters and gimmicks for the Knockouts, they can somewhat avoid this problem by taking care that future signees already have characters, are already, if not unique unto themselves, then at least unique on the Knockout roster. And this goes back to what I talked about in Part 1, what made the division so great back in 2007-2008. No two women should be alike, and everyone should have a distinct role that they're well suited for. Now let's do some brainstorming. Imagine for a minute that we're at point X in the future, and basically, what I theorized in Part 1 has happened. Many of the current Knockouts have been phased out and left the company, leaving them with those final four I talked about. Tara, Mickie, Tessmacher, Velvet. We have to restock this roster, but we have to do it with the right people. We have to find an eclectic mix of talents with diverse characters and personalities, each of whom can fill a unique role. First, let's think about the girls we already have, and what can be done to make them as fresh as possible. Some of this I've already been over. Velvet Sky, I think, should be made the Knockout Authority figure. Brooke Hogan has done nothing with it, but you put Velvet in that spot, and there might be a chance that the role could actually go somewhere. Mickie James, find a way to turn her heel that would be meaningful and impactful, and do it. Maybe bring back her old Psycho gimmick that she was so entertaining with. Tessmacher, I think, is okay the way she is. She's still pretty new in her role as a singles competitor, and she still has things she can do with the way her character is now. Until those creative possibilities have been exhausted, I don't see any reason to change her. Once again, Tara is the tricky one. She just had a pretty big character overhaul, and her being a heel is fine. I don't see anything wrong with that. But I'm not a fan of the Jesse Goddard's angle, or of Jesse Goddard's himself. I don't think he's very good, at least right now. And I still maintain that this thing with him and Tara just feels really awkward. Like it was written for someone else, but then they gave it to Tara instead. And I credit Tara for trying like hell to make it play, but it doesn't seem to be working that well yet. That said, it is at the very least something new for Tara, and it's possible they could figure out how to get it over as time goes on. I still don't like it, but seeing as how Tara's character was changed pretty dramatically just a few months ago, it's probably best to leave her the way she is for now. Moving on to the next women in line. Taylor Hendricks can be the scrappy rookie underdog character who is less experienced than everyone else and has to fight tooth and nail for every win. That seems like a natural fit for her right now. The Blossom Twins are easy. They're unique just because they're twins and they're a tag team. So if your makeshift teams don't work out, you've always got these two who look like they were made for the tag titles. That's what they're primarily focused on. That can be their MO. As for Taryn Terrell, I don't know. I really don't. Unless she figures out what she can bring to the table that no other knockout can, probably her best bet would be to just stay a referee. As for Leva Bates, she tends to work best as an underdog babyface, but I wouldn't want her and Taylor Hendricks doing the same thing, unless they were going to be a tag team. So in the event that they both wound up on the roster, I would probably have Leva be a face, since I think she would bring a little more flavor to that role, and I'd turn Taylor heel and align her with Tara. I think that would be a wise decision. Now we're looking at new people. So what roles do we need filled? Well, there's a big one that's been sorely missing ever since Awesome Kong left, and that's the role of a no-nonsense, take-no-prisoners ass-kicker. In my opinion, Alyssa Flash was more than capable of filling that role, but they never even tried with her when she was there, so let's think of someone else. One woman a lot of people have been talking about is Alpha Female, this 6-foot 1-inch powerhouse from the UK. She worked a dark match for TNA at one point. Also, just recently confirmed, TNA will be doing a gut check seminar on their upcoming UK tour, and Alpha Female has signed up for it. So there you go. I'm not incredibly familiar with Alpha Female. The badass monster thing is a role she plays very well from what I've seen, but I'm not entirely sure if she speaks English. So for now, let's keep looking. There's 2 female talents stateside that I think would be strong candidates. The first one is Melanie Cruz. She's a big, mean, powerful woman, certainly has the physical tools needed, but she doesn't seem to have a whole lot going on in the charisma or mic skills department in my experience. That's why I think the woman for the job is Athena. Seems pretty confident on the microphone and is more athletic than a lot of the male wrestlers I could name. There are very few women on the indies I know of that can put a beating on someone in as exciting a fashion and look as good doing it as Athena can. Also, and I want to be careful here because this is a sensitive issue, but she's ethnic. And I think that's a good thing. A little diversity couldn't hurt. Now, that's something the Knockout division used to have a lot more of, and now it really doesn't. Even on the current roster, it's Gale and that's it. Again, I'm not counting Sarita and Rosita here. So, for these reasons and more, to fill this particular role, I say Athena is the one you want. Here's a woman that my viewers have heard me talking about for a while now. Courtney Rush. She's someone that I've become a bigger and bigger fan of over the last year or so. Lots of personality with this one, tons of charisma, very entertaining, very funny, and she already tried out for Gut Check. Seems like a slam dunk to me. Rush is a talent that I've been hoping TNA would take a look at, and I definitely think she would suit the role of, I don't want to say comedy knockout because that's not right, but the woman who brings a lot of levity and fun to what she does, similar to what the fans get from ODB, not to compare the two or anything. And in my opinion, there would be no better way to use her than to team her with Kaz and Daniels. Oh my God, match made in heaven. These 3 would be so perfect together. Why on earth are they not on my TV screen, Gangnam styling their way into the hearts of millions right now? I'm just saying, people. Okay, now what are we missing? Well, we're missing a high flyer. We don't have a high flyer yet. Athena can probably do some of that stuff, but we need a knockout who can be primarily marketed as the woman who goes high risk, just to set her apart from the others. And for my money, there is only one woman for this role. She's the first choice, the best choice, the only choice, Kaylee Ray. You may know her from Pro Wrestling Eve. If you haven't heard of her yet, YouTube her matches and watch them right now. You can thank me later. This woman is fantastic. An amazing athlete, cute as all hell. She's a star that the casual fans just haven't found out about yet. She can do the suicide dives, the swanton bombs. She's been making a name for herself really quickly in the last 2 years or so. I fully expect her to be one of the best in the world someday. And hell, she can already work circles around most women I could name, and she's only 20 years old. TNA, trust me. If Kaylee Ray has any interest in doing business with you, snatch her up before someone else does. If you don't, you will regret it. Here's another one. We've got Velvet Sky as the authority figure, so I think it's a good idea to have some other management type to act as a heel foil for her. Maybe someone to be Velvet's assistant, who has some type of power to book matches and such when Velvet's not around. Someone who might have her own agenda and can go behind Velvet's back to help out the heels. And in my mind, there is a woman who is absolutely perfect for this role, Veda Scott. You might know her as an interviewer in ROH, or you might know her as an up-and-coming independent wrestler. Still a rookie, but very talented and shows a ton of promise, both as a worker and as a character. In fact, in terms of character, Veda is already way ahead of most women who have been in the business a lot longer than she has. She hasn't been doing this very long at all, and she's already found a gimmick and an identity that suit her perfectly. She really excels at playing this devious, uptight, nerdy character who finds ways to sort of bend the rules to suit her own ends. And as far as I'm concerned, there would be no one better to play a stuffy, bureaucratic, quasi-nemesis for Velvet Sky, to screw with Velvet when her back is turned, and to screw with the babyfaces in the ring when she has to. Now, if we stopped there, that would give us authority figure, secondary heel authority figure who can double as a wrestler, top heel, all-American babyface, underdog rookie, tag team specialists, heel tag team rivals, high flyer, fun-loving comedy type, ass-kicking tweener Samoa Joe type, and referee. That's 12 knockouts, 13 if we're counting Leva, enough for a real division with 2 championships. Each one is different, each one has a unique role, and thus presents unique creative possibilities. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Kind of like the knockout division we used to have a couple years ago before it got so much less interesting. But ultimately, this is just speculation, fantasy booking, whatever you want to call it. It's something that I wanted to put out there as an example of what TNA could be doing with the knockouts to try to encourage them to go back to what worked so well in the past as opposed to what we have now. Because it seems like the knockout division has been somewhat thrust into the back seat in recent times. It doesn't mean what it used to for various reasons, and I hate to say it, but a lot of the damage inflicted upon it over the last few years was easily preventable. Horrible title reigns. Pushes gone wrong. Terrible talent acquisitions. Gimmicks that made no sense. Disastrous character developments. Pushes that went too long. Pushes that were too brief. Championships turned into jokes. Championships rendered meaningless. Hot potato title changes. Potential big stars misused and wrongly released prematurely. And others who really should have been. Any of these things on their own aren't the end of the world, but when you add them all together, it starts to paint a not-so-pretty picture. And looking back on all this, you can probably understand why I think it would be a good idea to scrap the majority of the current division and hit the reset button. Maybe by starting fresh with a mostly new women's roster and being mindful of what put the knockout division of today in the state that it's in, they could avoid making those same mistakes in the future. Thanks everyone for listening to this exploration of the ladies of TNA. I appreciate you sticking with me. Peace. Out.